Hi everybody, welcome back to Leafy Concern. It's time for another video, and today I'm going to be talking at you a bit about 1984. I've got my molasses jar to drink some water from. There's my big thumb knuckle. So I know I haven't been making many videos lately as Leafy Concern, and I'd like to change that. Just out of principle. I just think it's more fun to have more videos than fewer, to have more than less. To have a greater number of videos than a smaller number. I don't know how words work. Being quite honest with you, I've developed this floater in my right eye. It's like a speck that happens when I'm reading something. It'll just kind of dangle over here and follow my eye as I'm reading. And it makes it kind of hard to read unless I'm reading in low light, which is why I read at night by candlelight here. And then I also try to read in a way where I turn the book away from the sun and read with the page in shadow. And so that makes it a little bit tougher to read as much as I'd like, because I can't read in all kinds of light like I used to be able to read. Just out of curiosity, I mean, if any of you actually struggle with that, please leave a comment below. And, tell me about how you deal with it if you are bothered at all by floaters when you read. And just so it's not distracting, here's the stack of books to my right. This is what's kind of in the offing. I've given my copy of Pereira Maintains to someone, but I found this new copy of Stories with Pictures, and we should talk about that ASAP. I haven't written down any notes about 1984, so we're just going to wing it. I'll start out by saying that this copy was given to me by my friend. It's clearly a remaindered copy. It was found in a little free library around Madison, and it has, I don't understand why I have this effect on my... It has a very shiny ink to the spine here on 1984. My finger just looked crazy there. It's very shiny, it kind of gleams. And then also the cloth on this particular Everyman's edition is not the maroon that I tend to prefer or the blue that I settle for, but it is a bright red. And I have done some writing in it, so if that triggers you, then turn off the video. So the book is none other than George Orwell's 1984 with an introduction by Julian Simmons. Sorry, I think that's Julian Simons. A ruler, which is what I use to underline most typically, unless I'm using pencil and don't care, is a nice little provisional bookmark. I just wanted to show you like the other Everymans that I'm talking about. This is another book in my house, is the collected stories of Franz Kafka, and it's lived its life without its jacket, and its cloth is full of dust and stuff, but it's that blue. And then there's this other one of mine, which I really want to read very soon, that I got in college and haven't read yet. Joseph and His Brothers, the John Woods translation. And this one, I believe, is a more maroon. And it's a little prettier, I'd say, than the like bright red here, which you can tell, you can see the, hold on. Here, jacket's now fully removed, you can see the difference. Which is preferred? I've typically preferred the one on the bottom. I also had a copy of The Betrothed that I might have talked about on the channel. I think I've given that away to someone since I got it, but it was also this maroon. Also, what causes the difference in Everyman's colors? Is it just like different places that they're printed have different cloth available or something? Or does it correspond to different eras, this being the oldest, second oldest, or, something like that? Kafka was printed and bound in Germany. Joseph and His Brothers was also bound in Germany. But the 1984 was printed and bound in the United States of America, in Berryville, Virginia. So we get this red as a berry, red as a poison berry, 1984. Yeah, basically I've been thinking I want to do like a video a week now, I think it would be great to like basically do a video a week, aim to do it every Monday, and just like, even if I haven't finished a book or something, make a report on the week's reading or share what I'm thinking about books in general. It shouldn't be too hard to stick to that schedule, and it also could, just by checking in like that, I might have a better chance of landing on books that like I finish and love and actually get something out of. Now back to the Orwell, which I've rejacketed. So I'm going to try to recap my history of reading Orwell up to this point. I was introduced to Animal Farm in middle school. I don't know that I found it condescending to my intellect or whatever, but I found it like a little boring or something at the time, maybe a little too overtly symbolic or something, or I was just lazy in middle school. And then the next thing by Orwell I read wasn't until after college, when I read Down and Out in Paris and London during kind of like break times that I would steal out of where I was working at the time. Foot seems to be healing up nicely. Oh, would you look at that? Here's another Everyman edition with this nice brown cloth. Printed and bound in Germany. So it seems like all the cloth colors I like seem to come from Germany. Anyway, let me keep looking for that Down and Out in Paris and London. I think my future Orwell reading is going to be The Road to Wigan Pier, which is one of his works of nonfiction. Not classified as a novel at all, although I've seen some people... Like, I thought Down and Out in Paris and London was just nonfiction, but I think some people classify it as nonfiction. And then Coming Up for Air was the next novel I thought I'd try, because the library had it, and it seems simple enough, and it seems like it could be a cool way to appreciate Orwell's writing in a vastly different fictional universe, and see how, well, not so vastly different, it'd be fun to see the ways in which this is tethered to the fantasy of 1984. And I'll just say that I also covet that big old giant, Everyman, like, complete essays from Orwell. I really want to read that too. So that's probably in the future. Sometimes I'll even light candles in the middle of the day because they're so cheap and they're so comforting. Anyway, let's actually talk about my thoughts about the book. I read the introduction, and what I mainly took from the introduction was that Orwell actually had friends say or publishers say that they were worried that if he published 1984, people would get the wrong idea. Like, i.e., they would just dislike socialism in general, and they wouldn't take any of the broader messages of the book. They would just misunderstand. They would basically use it to fuel anti-socialist kind of propaganda and stuff like that. Or they would just, I don't know. And then the other part that I really took with me was this little bit about the intensity with which Orwell felt all this gives the book its terrible grandeur. So far from being ballsed up because he was so ill, it would be nearer the mark to say that the awful vision of a possible future could only have been written by a sick man. Now, the two things I took from that was that every time I would think, wow, this book it really sweeps you along. I think partly that has to do with the towering reputation of the book. But then I would also think, I think Orwell does just really feel all this. The spite feels real. And then also, sometimes I would think, when I would be very disturbed by the book, or the book would feel, I guess, imbalanced in some way, I would say, is he really sick? And if so, how? I wouldn't really come down and make a verdict about whether Orwell was sick, and if so, how sick. But these thoughts remained in my head throughout reading, and that's why I made that little note there. The paper in this book is so creamy and nice and thick and like just really fun pages to turn. Really a luxurious experience. And the luxuriousness of the experience was really thrown into relief, or it was really brought, oh my gosh, it was really the luxuriousness of the reading experience really hit home, or when I saw how the font is bigger in the actual text than in the intro. I liked that. I love a book with a nice big font like this. I think one of the things it allows me to do is to read in the somewhat lower light I need these days to read past that little bothersome floater, which can sometimes cause headaches if I focus on it at all. Sometimes I'm like Big Brother watching the floater in my eye. So one of the things I enjoyed most about the book was the appendix that talks about newspeak. After after getting to the end of the book and turning the page, it was it conjured up quite a feeling to go back to this appendix that I'd enjoyed so much at the start, because part 3 of the novel really drives home the violent reality of this fictional universe that Orwell has created. When I first encountered this appendix, I was like, oh, how fun. What fun world building. And I actually was talking to people while I was reading the book about how I wish there were more appendices and notes. Maybe I was influenced by how I'd just recently read some of Infinite Jest. But I was like, I want more of this. I want just without having to spend too much time in the gruesome details of like torture and, mental deprivation and stuff like that and nightmarishness. Aside from all that, I just like a bunch of information, a bunch of dossiers that kind of build up a world. And I know that there are lots of books that do this, and you could probably recommend a few. I'm thinking that Dictionary of the Khazars is one, and maybe like Rise and Fall of Dodo is another. And then there are other kind of things like, House of Leaves and stuff. And there's those Lemony Snicket things. And then there's all kinds of books that do this, that purport to just give documents from, Infinite Jest is something that does that. Give documents from the fictional universe, appendices, little reference works that stick onto the text and give a new kind of concreteness to the world building. I think the thing from Newspeak that I wanted to take from Newspeak that no one else that I'd talked to had read the book had really taken from it was ungood. Where the prefixes anti, un, and plus. I think un plus good is probably the bit of newspeak I would take from the book to supplement the words that everybody knows, like thought crime and doublethink. I like these words. Good sex is chastity. It's like funny. It has a kind of hilarious, romping quality to it. But I actually lied when I kind of insinuated that there aren't other documents contained in the book, because at a certain point you get to read a couple of chapters. I like that they're discontinuous chapters from a book that is really hard to come by in this universe. I'll just leave it at that. And by the time you get to these sorts of long explanations, they no longer have a romping quality. They have more of a stomping quality and a kind of, emotionally, kind of emotional urgency. One thing that I loved about this section where you start to read this book is that you get to this paragraph about the pleasure of reading. And I encourage everyone to just sort of pause the video and read this paragraph, because it describes our pleasure in reading, I gotta say. Like many people, I'm sure, who read the book, like when Julia first came about, based on the way that Julia was handled and what Julia was having the character do and how kind of improbable their meeting seemed to be, based on all that, I was like, okay, this is a sex fantasy by George Orwell. And I made a couple of friends laugh by doing that, by saying that, because of course it's reductive and it's not really true. But in a broader sense, I am interested in books that people write that are just, I am interested in performing the thought experiment of, what if this is just a sex fantasy? Not that I have to say just a sex fantasy, but what if we view it as a sex fantasy? Does that help us understand our author better? Does it help us to succumb to the fantasy of it better by knowing that it's connected to like deep desires in this way, that it's deeply felt in that way? In a broad sense, I'm interested in reading sex fantasies of this sort, and maybe in a kind of crudely Freudian way that would really disappoint old Nabokov, who I love and hope to read much more of this year. I'm just too quick to jump to that assumption. I think that's the right thing to say. I wonder if this is a little on the nose when they wake up from, their lovemaking, and he wakes up with the word Shakespeare on his lips. Really, I recommend that everyone read this book because even if you just enjoy that first part where the romance really hasn't begun and the torture hasn't begun, both of which will be very graphic and engrossing. Well, not very graphic, but graphic enough to feel immediate. Before all of that, you're just learning about how people correct the past and how Winston Smith's department works. And the term that everyone uses when they talk about what they enjoyed about this book, I've seen so far, is world building. And you're going to enjoy those parts tremendously. The person who actually gave me this book is someone who I know appreciates that kind of thing. And I kept on thinking, oh, well, I should give this book back to them or let them borrow it. And then it kind of drifts away from that. And I thought, well, maybe I don't need to so urgently force it on that person. Maybe I'll give it to someone who likes Catcher in the Rye or Henry Miller or something. Lastly, I'll just say that, are any of you as fascinated as I am by what the great disparities that people can have in their reactions to 1984? Like, people can view it as just different kinds of people, libertarians and socialists and capitalists and so forth. Like, they can all kind of wield the book to say what they want to have it say. And I think people who are generally disposed to be worried that some sort of conspiracy is happening or something, like, I think those people can really latch onto the book in a way that I don't think is like necessarily wrong, but is, probably worrisome if you're someone like, say, George Orwell yourself or something. And so that kind of danger to the book, like, you're reading this book that you agree with, and then you also see how it can be a book that people who typically would be tough to talk to for one reason or another would also agree with. That sense of danger and also sort of camaraderie with all those readers is one of the best feelings you get from reading 1984. And with that, and without having said that much, I'll bid adieu. Again, hoping to have many more videos this year. I'm just hoping to read and have fun reading and make videos, about it that I think would be fun to make or fun to watch as I go. So thanks, everybody. Have a good 2023. Happy New Year.